actually talk about what I spend the other half of my life doing besides work, which is Christmas light show. So let's start this off. I'm going to give you guys all a little preview of our show this year. I'm going to actually come over here. So we'll watch. I know the video quality is not going to be great coming through here. When we get done with this, I'm going to post make a post on communities with a link to this video and a bunch of the stuff we talked about. So you can definitely check it out. But here we go.
Loading Lucy Depp Park Light Show 2024. Testing brightness. Programming lights. Remixing music. Broadcasting on 87.9. Testing bass. Stand by for show start.
Let's do this. We wish you a merry.
All right. So this is slide. So this is my entire neighborhood. We come together. We put this on every year. It is 9 houses that are all synchronized. We cover about 12 acres of woods. It's pretty unique that a lot of shows will just do the front of a house. We decided we'd wrap trees with lights. So it's a half-mile loop. People come and drive through. It's just outside Columbus, Ohio, if you feel like coming on by. And cool part with us is every single light is a pixel. And I'll show in just a second what that means. But that means we have a ton of channels to control. So there's 317,000 individual channels. We can basically control every single bulb with an RGB value. There's 26 show controllers this year. And I'll show you guys a picture of that. But it's basically a mini little computer that's running that portion of the show. That gets broken out to about 200 expander boxes so that we can power everything. There's roughly 75 network devices. The number keeps growing and everything. But there's a lot of stuff it takes to put this on. We transmit the show audio over FM, and I'll show you guys that, but that's where a lot of the changes this year went into sort of moving around our head end and everything and adding a lot of monitoring around that. But that's really where we use Q-SYS on top of this. So Q-SYS acts as our overall monitoring and show control platform to make sure everything's running, and then if there are issues, it automatically resolves it. So like I said, it's all pixels. When we started this is our 8th year now. When we started this, the first year was all regular Christmas lights, with just sort of your standard, almost like theatrical style dimmer, but there's outdoor ones they make for Christmas lights. Starting year 2 or 3, we started playing around. We added a pixel tree, and then it just kept going from there. So we completely converted over probably about year 4 or 5. So there are 105,717 pixels. At least that's what the computer tells me. But each one of these is powered by 12 volts. There's a little teeny chip inside each one of the pixels. It strips off the first 3 bytes of data to get the RGB and then passes it down the line. But that's how we can control every single one. So the number one question we get all the time is, when do we start hanging? We start putting lights up in August or September for this. Some people keep their lights up. I like to take mine down. It's just a matter of opinion, but there's 400 or 500 trees that are wrapped. So it would, if we took everything down, we'd be putting it back up before we even got it all down. So the show controllers, this just keeps growing and growing and growing every year. Across the bottom of our pictures, they all are basically the same thing. It's just a matter of how you want to connect to the pixels. So we run 2 Raspberry Pi 4s in a redundant pair, which we'll talk about the software in a second. The software doesn't really support that, so we use Q-SYS to drive that redundancy. And that's really all that's doing is just driving our show audio and sending out sync packets. And then we have a ton of remotes. So we have 14 of this guy right here, 3 of its bigger brother. All of these allow us to do the woods. So those RJ45 ports go to a breakout expander that then allows us to drive 4 trees off that. So the smaller guy here can drive 40 trees. This can drive 64 trees. And then there's certain areas where there are a bunch of things together that we can locally drive them. So that's where we use some of these 8-channel ones. I've got a 20-foot or so tall pixel tree that's driven off one of the 16-channel ones. But under the hood, they all are capes for pocket beagle bones, which are very similar to a Raspberry Pi. They're just a little mini computer. Either pocket or actually these bigger ones use a full-size beagle. But each one of these is a little mini computer running Debian Linux and running a piece of software called Falcon Pi Player. So this is open source software. It's extremely powerful, really, really well developed. So every one of our players is running this. The players each have their portion of the show. So when we render it, it chops it out into, say, my snowflake player will handle its 8 snowflakes, and that's all it has on it. The main player then sends out once a second a sync packet not too dissimilar from PTP, where it basically just says, I'm playing this sequence, I'm at this time, and sync up to me. And so all the remote players sync up to it, and it does a really good job with it. But to support that, we got to be able to network all this. And unfortunately, it's not all just in my backyard. So to network it, we run a really, really extensive show network. We're using Ubiquiti AirMax. So this is what you see a lot in like wireless ISPs that do point to point. So it's extremely, extremely wideband. It's 40 or 80 megahertz wide. Running. It all connects back to, most of them connect back to one main antenna. There is a little bit extra off on the side as we've expanded. We can't all hit that. And then we have what we call our little baby IDFs out in the field. So this is the newest design we're running with all them, but we have Netgear GS110s. These are sort of it's an older model, but it's works really well because it's got full management. So we can do SNMP from Q-SYS, and we'll show how we do that. But we've got a managed switch. We PoE power most of the controllers. So all the ones that feed the differentials out in the woods, those are all PoE powered directly. We also, I'll talk towards the end about some of the power monitoring stuff we're including, but these get a little Shelly plug-in power monitor. There's a Ruckus WAP that goes in there to just give, we're not running any of the show-off Wi-Fi, but we use it just to connect devices when we're out programming, or some of the power monitoring runs off that. And it powers our antennas. So you can see they're all either in just a bunch of little ammo boxes. We've got some Harbor Freight Pelicans we've modified. But we have, gosh, I'm thinking off the top of my head, a lot of switches. And actually, I've got a diagram. This is last year's diagram, so this has changed more and grown more, but this just gives an idea of the size and scope of it. So there's a lot going on. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I think 9 remote network locations. And then some of those span out. Some have a couple switches off them. And then all of it comes off the head end. So to program it, we use software called X-Lights. This is another really cool open source software. And in X-Lights, we actually 3D model the entire neighborhood. So here's it looking down, but this is a true 3D model. We can spin around, we can see where all the lights are. We know exactly what's connected where. And then we sit every year and create, we not only create the soundtrack, but then we sequence the whole thing ourselves. So the show is roughly about 7 minutes every year. Um, that's about as much as we can do without just totally congesting the heck out of the neighborhood. Um, so we can see here, you can see we've got 3D model on one screen, we got the timeline on the middle. It almost looks and feels like a video editing software, but you can go in and we do stuff we leverage groups very heavily because programming all 700 individual items would take forever. But it does take a considerable amount of time. Between myself and one of my neighbors, we usually spend, it's roughly about 100 hours to program the show. So this is pretty much the months of October and November. What I do every night is sit and program the show, and then what looks great on the computer, you go and look at it out in real life, and it either looks really good or you scrap it and go back. So there's lots and lots of that going on. So jumping into a bunch of starting to get into where Q-SYS comes into play in this. Here's our head end. This is in my basement. So going from the top, we have our GPS, NTP, and soon to be PTP Clockmaster. I just haven't moved that over because everything's running right now. Going down, we have a Motorola XPR radio. I'll talk a little bit about some of the radio integration we do, but that's how we can do some basic control. So we have a beautiful UCI, but for a lot of people involved with this, it's easier just to give them a radio and then it works anywhere in the neighborhood. So we can actually send DTMF commands over two-way, Q-SYS decodes it and then controls it. I've got a jump PC right there that's running UCI viewer, so we can see our UCI right there. I've got a Synapse Dante confidence monitor there, so that will play us both the audio going out, as well as there's a second channel of Dante streaming that is the FM confidence receive back in. So we're also ensuring that we're actually receiving the audio that we're sending out. And then there's a third channel that does all the two-way radio traffic, just in case I want to listen to that somewhere else. And then we get into our pies. So we can see we've got our redundant pair of pies. Both of these are connected via USB bridging to the main core. So one is connected directly to the Core 110. One goes through an IO USB bridge. But that's how we get the audio out of the player and into Q-SYS before we transmit it out. And then we have a FM confidence tuner here. So this is tuning back into what we're transmitting, make sure it's going out. All of this is powered by that Core 110 right there. We've also got an ESXi host that's hosting some of the applications. I'll talk at the end. We're in the middle of transitioning a lot of stuff over to MQTT. So we run EMQX as our broker, which is a open source broker that supports multiple nodes. So one of the nodes is right here. We have a second one that's going to get co-located out into the show once we fully transition everything over. And we've got a spare development Pi just to be able to test stuff because once the show's up and going, I can't really take stuff down during the day. So
Kevin,
yes,
this is a perfect time to interject with our first question from
Yeah.
Eric Carlson. How much of this is you convincing your neighbors? How much of it is you and your neighbors being nerds together? And how do you kind of break up all this cost? There's a lot of stuff you have going on.
Yeah, so I'm really lucky. When we started it, it was me and one of my other neighbors across the street. He had been saving his allowance money since he was a kid to put up Christmas lights. And so legitimately, the first time he knocked on my door, he's like, I want to do a Christmas light display out here. And I'm like, that's cool. I had previously worked way long before at Q-SYS. I worked at the zoo here in Columbus. And I didn't do the light programming, but I interfaced a lot with that. I did all the soundtrack for the show a couple of years, and interfaced with those guys. So I had an idea what gear to use. So I'm like, let's do a show. So the two of us started it, and then the rest of the neighbors just started buying in. So there was very little convincing we had to do. Most people saw how cool it was and wanted to join in. So he handles a lot of the hanging of the lights. He does a lot of all the controllers we have to build. So we'll get the boards, but we build in the enclosure and stuff. He handles a lot of that. So he handles a lot of the physical side of it. I do all the stuff to make it communicate and work, and then him and I split up the programming. So the two of us do that. All the houses themselves buy all their lights. They get all their lights hung. We'll help them and make sure everything's in the right spot. But yeah. So we do one thing I didn't say at the beginning. Every year we'll raise money for a different charity. So in the past couple years, we did a local rescue group. This year we're doing a group that provides meals for kids. So all the donation money goes 100% to that. We self-fund all this ourselves. So it is every year we roughly add 20 or so thousand pixels or so. I think that was how much we went up this year. But you split that amongst 9 people and it evens out. So cool. So this is one of the big things we moved this year. So previously we transmitted the FM out of one of the sheds. The antenna we were using just kept getting destroyed and we're replacing it every year. So I said, hey, let's try out. I moved it down to my house. This is the second house I've owned in the neighborhood and in the show. So I've always wanted to bring it down here because then I can actually run the audio through Q-SYS. The Ubiquity AirMax is really great, except it can't handle stuff like PTP or QLAN. Because it is still wireless, it just can't hold up with that. So we never really ran audio through Q-SYS before. We use it for control on top. But we moved the audio down here this year. So now this is mounted out in my garage, but this is where we transmit from. So the audio comes out an IO frame. We also added a secondary FM transmitter this year. The main one, which is the one up in the upper right, has worked great for 8 years, but we realized if that thing goes down, we're really stuck. So we wanted to get a redundant one in. Now that it's down here and we can do some more control and monitoring, that made it a lot easier to add a secondary one. Part of the goal of this is everything I do, I want to make sure it will automatically self-heal itself as much as possible. So that's where we'll talk about some of the control integration. But I've got a Mid-Atlantic rack link right here that's actually powering both of those. And so that will handle the failover between the two transmitters. And it's on UPS. We're monitoring the UPS, VS, and MP just to make sure we've got proper power and everything out there.
So Andy Dolph asked, and I know we were talking about it a few slides back with the Culp lights boards, but what pixel lights are you driving off of those?
Yeah, so these are what are called WS2811. They're 12-volt pixels. So there's a ton of different places you can get them, but they're all basically the same. So if you've ever done like case lighting for computers, runs off WS. Govi's got really popular this year. They're using the WS2811 protocol. So it's a pretty standard protocol for them. We buy enough that we actually have a factory in China does a production run for us of them every year. But there's a bunch of different places online you can get these lights, both from internationally or if you want to source them domestically. So let's go ahead. Let's jump out of PowerPoint and dive into Q-SYS. So like I said, and if you've seen this in the past, I'm going to start with what we had previously, and then we'll dive into what we have now. So every house here is an example of one of those remote little IDFs. And so we sort of visualize that out in our Q-SYS design, just like you would see out there. So we bring in our AirMax antenna. So the AirMax has a monitoring tool called UISP. I can remember. They keep changing the name. It was UNMS. Now I think it's UISP. It's a tool to monitor and maintain it. The cool thing is it has an API. So we integrate with the API and we pull down the status of all the antennas. So not only are we getting, hey, is this antenna okay? But I'm actually getting signal strength. I'm getting upload and download speed. So the connection from this antenna back can handle up to 117 by 120 meg connection, which during the show is awesome because we're sending a single packet a second. So that's way more than enough bandwidth. The access points, we are all, right now, we're just doing ping monitoring for them. So just pinging, make sure it's alive. Because they're not really show critical, we don't need to get as deep on them. And then our actual controllers. So one of the things I love about Falcon Pi Player, if I go over to an instance, is they have an extremely well documented API. So we can see here pretty much anything I want to do with one of these players is available via API, which allows us to really tie in a lot of stuff with Q-SYS. So here we've got, this is looking at one of these players, so we can see what mode the player is in, what the player is actually doing. If it is playing something, we will see what's playing. So I'll actually, when we get over to the head end, I'll start up that player and we'll see that update. We can see if there's playlists. All the remote players don't have playlists, so that's why we don't see it there. We can see host information, so we can see memory usage, disk utilization. We can actually have it go if it has an upgrade available. So all the players themselves will actually check against the Falcon Pi Player GitHub repository when they push an update. It's our busiest weekend, so we haven't updated them. They're all about a version behind. We have some backup mechanism, which I'll talk about in a little bit. I'm sort of torn, and I've gone back and forth between exactly how we do the backup. There's a couple different ways we've explored doing that. We can flip the actual player mode. So is it a remote player or is it a player, which would be a standalone? We can view the schedule and we can flip them into test mode. So when we go and hang lights, this is really helpful. Test mode will flip them in a sequence that goes between red, green, blue. So even if we haven't programmed anything for the year yet, just flipping on test mode will get all the lights going between red, green, blue. It makes it really helpful when we're going out and hanging so that we know that port is configured right and that you know, the lights we're putting up are good. One downside to pixels is if one goes bad, all the ones behind it hopefully don't come on. But depending what part went bad inside that little pixel node, you can actually have scenarios where it will start flashing out, start just putting out random data. We call them tweakers because they just start going crazy and tweaking out. So that's really helpful when we're putting up the lights to be able to test that. So we use this pretty much all day, every day during the time we're hanging lights. And that's one of the things that ties in with the radio. So all of that comes and runs all our individual devices, and then we have our switch. This was the sort of the first layer of automation we added in, is because these are computers, they do occasionally lock up. So we wanted sort of generation 1 of our monitoring was just running these into monitoring proxies. This was back when we had a wide assortment of switches, some managed, some not, some just all over the place. So 2 years, I think starting 2 years ago, and then definitely last year, we made a real concerted effort to try and standardize on the network so that we were able to start implementing some control. So this here is a basic little script I wrote. And what we're doing is this is talking to the switch over SNMP. So SNMP is a common protocol used in IT devices. It allows basic communication, and it's got sort of a fairly standardized subset of controls. So from that, we can gain some information about the switch. I can see how long it's been up. It pulls in the location and the name of it, pulls in a description. So we can see this is actually a little bit larger one. This is a GS418 that's running our sort of head end where the main antenna is, because that is the main antenna is actually not at my house anymore because I'm at the bottom of a hill. So and then we bring it in down here. This is where some of the magic sort of happens. So from SMP, we can see the link status. We can see if something's plugged into a port on the switch. And we can toggle PoE status. So I can actually turn PoE on and off for a device. But we wanted to take that one step further on all of the PoE powered controllers. So in this case, we see there's a K40 here. This is PoE powered. We wanted to actually automate that. So as you can see in the wiring, when we wire it, I have all 8 inputs are status inputs that watch the status from whatever device is feeding it. If that status goes into a fault, the script will automatically wait 30 seconds. And if it's still in fault, turn the PoE off and back on that port. So if we have auto mode engaged, it will turn it off and on that port. So it will automatically self-recover that device. This is probably one of my most favorite things that we've added, and it is extremely helpful. We probably on average have a controller, especially once they've been out and running, and over the weekend it got into the teens, we'll get single digit temperatures, just stuff happens. The players are reading from SD cards a lot. Probably once every 2 or 3 days, we'll get one that locks up. I have one that I'm still trying to figure out what's going on. I think it might actually be a bad USB NIC that probably locks up every day. Back in the day, we used to have to look out our windows, see that the lights were out in a section, and go out, bundle up, go walk through the woods, go unplug it, plug it back in, wait for it to come back up, make sure it's all good. Now, this automatically handles it for us. It sends an alert, and usually by the time I see the alert on my phone, it's already resolved itself. So this is extremely invaluable, being able to do this. So that is one of my favorite parts. So as we see, we go through the houses. Every house is laid out a little different. We simply just wire it all in and bring it that way. We also grab all the statuses from the house and throw them in a status combiner to give us the overall combined status. And when we get into the UCI, I'll show where we display that. So let's go over to our head end. And let me scroll up. So we can see at our head end, we're monitoring a lot more stuff. We're monitoring, make sure the router's running, make sure a lot of our services are running. Let's go ahead and I'm going to actually start it from the web so we can show it starts up. We're going to start the show. And we'll see in a second. I've got, I think there's about a 30-second poll time. We slowed down some of the polling on this, and I'll talk about why and some of the things we did. But this will start updating in 30 seconds. So it's going to be the longest 30 seconds of my life till it pulls in. But we can see on this one, it's actually showing the playlist. It will show what's scheduled once we get into the schedule time later on today. There we go. So we can see it's playing this playlist. It's this sequence name. Here's the media time. Here's our running time where we're at. And this one is sending multi-sync. So this is our main player. So now that that's started, if we come back to some of our remotes, we'll see now all of our remotes are playing. So let's actually, I'm going to jump over to the UCI side to talk a little more about all the icons are. There we go. So all those statuses we combine, we bring it in, and we use the individual place status to show this map. So this is shown on the rack in my basement. I've got a neighbor who has this up on, he's watching it through Reflect in his garage and just has it up on a TV screen. So we got a couple places we can watch everything. I've got an iPad we take around for all this. So in an ideal world, everything's green. We get a nice green border and we're going. So this is showing us that same playlist information. We can actually control. So here's where we can choose which player we want to be using, our primary or our secondary. Are we going to enable auto failover? And do we want to start and stop a sequence? All the controllers come in here. So we've got each individual controller we can go in and see. So we can see a lot of these remotes are all playing now. And be able to go in and individually control. We can also sort of group control some of them. So this is where our test mode comes in. So test mode on, test mode off. This sends notifications out to all the player scripts to be able to automatically flip them all into test mode. So if I flip all the tests on, we see it starts flipping on. If I just grab some random players, they're all playing. And we'll see the status actually updates to testing in a minute. So we can do that. All the antennas we were talking about. So here's the status of all the antennas we can bring up. So we see the status of them. Being able to watch all the signal strength. We don't really have any, we're not doing anything today with, hey, if the signal drops below a certain value. Some of that is because we are out in the woods. So when we get this all up and going, we have really low signal strength. And then once the leaves all fall, then all of a sudden we start getting much, much higher signal strength. But that is something I've thought about adding in the future. It's just giving some warnings or averaging the overall signal. And then, for example, this one right here that's at -89. It's actually a lot lower than it normally is because it got blown in the wind. So a lot of these are just antennas ratchet strapped up to trees temporarily during the show season. So they will move a little bit. So that's one of our future projects is add some smarts into the script to average the signal over time. Here's our network, so we can see all of our switches. So 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we've got 10 remote switches that are all being controlled from this. They're all running the same PoE monitoring. So you can see some things we don't want to auto PoE. So like the AirMax antenna, that's great. But if I turn the PoE off, I can't turn it back on because there's the SNMP just has an on and off. There's not a toggle command for that. So certain things we don't want to auto reboot. There's also some players, for example, my K8 here. I'll show a picture of this in a little bit, but these players are locally powered, so there isn't a way to PoE power them. So that's what I'll talk about in a little bit. Some of the future stuff we're doing is how do we address players like that if we need to reboot them. And then we can see our audio here. So we see we've got our primary playing because I went ahead and started it. We also have our secondary coming in. So during showtime, both players are actually running at the same time. And that will fit the failover. We simply just turn off multi-sync from the primary and turn it on the secondary. We're monitoring our core and our IO frame going out, and then our FM coming back. And in a second, when we start going through some of the scripts, I'll talk about how we're doing, what logic we're running on our FM coming back. But we can see right now it's just sitting in standby because it's outside of show hours. So we only really care about monitoring it during show hours. And the power we'll get to at the end, because that's some of the new fun we're doing. So let's go back over to Designer. So this is where we get into some of our audio. So we can see our audio coming in, USB bridging. We mix it down. We do some basic muting based off who's active for going out, and we send it out to our IO frame. We've got a couple extra sources. We've got a software Dante receiver in there. We've got an audio player. We've got pink noise. That's really just to help troubleshoot some stuff. So when we're trying to testing the FM, we have the ability, or if we need to route something else around, we can do that pretty quick and easily. Our two-way transmit, so this is coming back out. We use this to be able to just send prompts over the radio, which reminds me, I forgot to grab a radio to show some of this stuff, but we'll walk through it. I've got a video showing it. So when certain things happen, we go ahead and transmit text to speech. So just turning on lights, turning off lights. It gives a confidence back when you transmit over the radio that something's happening. We played with sending the status, but that got really, really lengthy. So I'll talk about what we've moved to for notifications. Doing notifications over the radio also is requires you to be carrying a radio at all times. So we did that last year. This year we moved to a little bit different stuff, but we do send audio back out over the radio. We also use signal presence to control the push to talk through GPIO, so we can actually remotely talk through the radio. And then here is our two-way radio receive. So let's go. I know I've got a slide showing this. Here's an example. So everyone involved with the show has a little radio here. They can hit a menu. And so, for example, when we want to flip on test mode, so it sends a sequence. That's one of the older sequences. We're actually now, everybody's got a code. So for example, like star 11 # would turn it on for me and identify that I turned it on. So some fun stuff we were going to play with at some point of actually being able to address.
So Corey is asking, what did you have to deal with regarding licensing for the FM as well as the content that you're generating for transmission?
Yeah, so the FM, we are broadcasting extremely as low power as we can go for it. So because it's all non-commercial, we don't need content licensing for that. For FM transmission, that's a fun answer. And then all the radio stuff we see here, this is all running on the open VHF band. So there's a section of VHF that you're allowed to use without licenses that you can use. It's used a lot for DTMF style like this, for stuff like gate controllers, pump controllers, golf courses and stuff like that use it. So that's the band we're using for that.
Cool. And then for the music you're generating as well.
Yeah, so the music, we're mixing all our own music for that. So we mix it all up. It's 7 minutes in that. We do 8 or so songs in that time, but we make our own soundtrack for that. So yeah, so the audio that comes in when we do that, we go through a bunch of band passes. This is actually a very, very old school Q-SYS script you may have seen if you've been doing Q-SYS a long, long time. to actually calculate DTMF. We did this back way in the day before the POTS port or SIP could automatically decode it. But it looks for the frequencies, and then if you get two of the same frequencies at the same time, it will then show the DTMF digit. So we just sort of sit on top of that, take it, and then we've got a we use star to indicate start a message, pound to indicate end a message. So that way, if it gets cut off or it can't decode it, it sort of knows it's not always just building a massive string it's looking for. It's basically a start a message, end a message delineator. So from the radios, we can turn test mode on and off. We can start and stop the show. We can query the status of everything going on. And we can ask about car count, which we'll talk about car count in just a minute. So I also had this nice little update all. We don't have a button on the radios to remotely initiate software updates, but this mechanism I already wrote. So this is sending notifications out to all the FPP scripts. Notifications is a great way in scripting that you can send data between scripts without having to wire anything. So every time I add a new house or player, I simply just copy this whole chunk right here, paste it in, and now it's going to get those notifications. So I leverage that to be able to hit mass update and run software updates on everybody at once. So with our FM monitoring, we always were doing FM coming back in just to make sure there was audio. But now that we've got primary and secondary transmitter, we wanted to dive in a little deeper, and we've got the audio signal going to them, trying to figure out the best way to ensure the actual audio going out is the audio that should be going out. And part of the problem with that is if I stop the player, if the FM transmitter is on, it will, which the FM transmitter is not on right now, FM transmitter will have dead air. But we wanted to actually start powering off the FM transmitter when we're not in show hours. So right now it's just getting static. And if I hover on over one of these, you'll see it's just pure white noise static. So that makes it a little hard to be able to differentiate, like, hey, is there something going out or not? So how we ended up approaching this year, we played with a lot of different ways, played with using the response analyzer, played with using some audio blocks to try and compare audio waveforms and everything. But the actual easiest way to do it was when the show is playing, we play a minute intro that sort of explains to everybody, hey, stay on the road, you know, here's some basic info about the show, all that stuff. We play that sequence, and then there's a 3-second gap. Then we play the show, then there's a 3-second gap, and we play that sequence again. So within, all in all, it's about 7.5 minutes. In that 7.5 minutes, twice there will be dead air on purpose. So we've got a script here that's actually running, and we run the audio through bandpass. And so I'm looking at, I just picked at random, 100 hertz and a kilohertz. And so what we're comparing is right now I've got signal coming in on both those frequencies, but there's no signal going out. So when we go into show hours, and we'll talk about our show hour script in a second, we start a timer, and it runs for 10 minutes. And if in those 10 minutes, we lose signal presence on both our low and high frequencies, so we hit those 3-second gaps, we turn a flag on. So every time, every 10 minutes, we reset those flags, and then we turn them on when we sense the gap. Because if the FM were to fail, static's never going to stop. It's always going to constantly be putting out noise. So every 10 minutes, the FM monitor checks to see, hey, did I see dead air within those within the 10 minutes? If I did, I'm at a good status. If I didn't, then I know, hey, there was an issue. And so that's when it then will automatically fail over and power up the secondary FM transmitter. On all of our failover stuff, we only ever go primary to secondary. We don't try to do anything fancy of like going back to primary or anything. We know and we'll get alerted there's a fault. So we know at that point, that's when we have to manually intervene and see what happened. And we can see the last audio thing. We just have our Dante feed. So we take the transmit audio that goes out, we take the radio audio, and we take the FM audio, and all that goes out Dante so that I can pull it up a couple of different places here in the house. So all of this down here, minus our basic UCI control. This is all stuff we started adding in this year because we've got all the players at the head end. So our show hours initially, and we're still in the process of transitioning. So some of this stuff we're going to show is in the middle of going on, but there are actual schedules we set up right here in the players. However, I got to manage this between both the players. I got to sync them. This we're starting to work towards going away. The other thing is we don't want this to be the single source of truth. We want a little bit more reliable place for a single source of truth. So anything we started writing this year, we really started going after this show hour script dictates it. So this shows me we've got a couple different conditions we can be in. So we can be in show hours as the show actually running. We can be after hours. So we play for the first hour after the show, we keep the FM on and play we keep the lights at like 10% blue and just say, hey, the show's over, please come back and everything. But we actually run that all night. We're in the middle of the woods. Deer love to run into the lights. Keeping them on helps keep all the critters away from running into it. It also helps. These are single lane roads that have some steep ditches on the side, so it just helps people see if they're going through. So after hours, we'll run all night until the morning. And that's why we broke out FM power. So the FM, after an hour, that FM power drops off. But we needed a single source of truth for this. So where does this all come from? It actually comes from GitHub. So we have a repository on GitHub that has our show hour schedule as a JSON. So every day we have what time do we start the show? What time do we stop the show? What time do we stop the transmitter? What time in the morning do we turn the show off? And this script integrates via this plugin I wrote. So this plugin will actually go out to GitHub. It uses GitHub's API and pulls down the repo. Now, the cool thing with this, it's using notifications again. So I can actually do multiple things. I can commit changes back up to GitHub, and I can pull from GitHub. So, and I can pull multiple files. So in my script, if I tell it to pull a file named this, it will pull it out of the repo. So every day, our show hour schedule pulls down that schedule. If I need to change it, it will automatically pull it in there. So one of the projects for next year is actually eliminating the scheduling in the players and rather driving it all from here. So this will drive all the players. So right now, this is driving all our monitoring side, but we'll start expanding that out. And we've got a monitoring proxy so we can see what's going on with the show hours and if it has any issues polling. This I'll be publishing to communities pretty soon. One of the, there's some fun we ran into with it where we were having it automatically back up all the players. We tried doing this all at once, which put a lot of load on the core. So I need to figure out if the memory leak is actually in just my sequencing of it, or, you know, we're pulling pretty big JSON configs down. how that's all working. So I want to test all that out before we publish it. But that is something I'm going to publish on communities pretty soon, and it works really well. So you can also use private access tokens, so you can actually set it up just per repository. So the API key I have only has certain rights for this certain repository. But we can see here where we had it running. Once the show started, I just turned off the automated backup because I need to troubleshoot that more, but none of the players change once the show starts. But this is part of our backup procedure too, is to have it automatically take all the settings from the player, load it up, and then if we need to reset up a player, be able to push it back. So our FM power control ties right in with that FM monitoring. This is basically just a very basic script that's controlling the Mid-Atlantic plugin. So this is just the standard plugin for the rack link. But we wanted to be able to interlock these states and check. The last thing we want is two of these on at the same time. So we have a little script that sits in front of that, watches it. It takes that FM power time from the show hours, or we have a manual override here. So the manual override allows us, when we are testing when we're testing ahead of launching the show, if audio is detected, power up the FM. If it's not detected, turn it off. So, but we have the ability to manually do that. So like right now when we were playing, I don't have this enabled. We weren't transmitting at all. And then our player high availability. So FPP doesn't natively support redundant players, but because we are monitoring the players, we can see their status. We're actually able to manually choose what player we want to do, and then we run scripting logic to watch the status of our primary. If during show hours or after hours, our primary is not actively reporting it's playing, so if it completely falls off and goes into a fault, if it just stops playing for some reason, any status that's not playing, or there's one more stopping gracefully, which means it's going to stop at the end of that playlist. If it's not one of those two statuses, we will automatically fail over to the secondary. The cool thing is it's pretty instantaneous because the secondary is already playing. It's about the audio will switch over within like 2 seconds, and all the players resync up within about 10 seconds. So it's pretty seamless how quickly it fails over. And then the last thing we added that's in production this year is car counting. So in the past, we had my neighbor's 11-year-old daughter sit out in the window about once a year and try to go out and count cars. But we wanted to try and start playing with, is there a better way we can do it? Because we get snow and ice, we can't just run a tube across the road to count tires going across it. We played very, very long time ago with doing a laser break and trying to get just the right height. And that worked okay. Still might play with it a little in the future. But what we tried using this year is a service called Camlytics. So let me find my image for that. So Camlytics is an API, is a cloud-based AI camera analysis. So I've got a camera. I played with a couple different ones, and this sort of shows some of the fun with this. I actually have just a very basic $25 TP link that I threw up about 15 feet in the air. And so it watches an area, and it's got a service that runs locally that grabs the RTSP stream, and it runs AI detection on it. Now, it works okay. It works really good before the sun sets. Once the sun has started setting and the lights are strobing on and off, it becomes more of a challenge. And that's unfortunately part of our difficulty in this. I played with a couple different angles. We have lights everywhere, so there's not a good dead spot to aim the camera at. So that's something we're going to play with during the off hours. But we can see there's a big zone it detects, and then as a car goes through, if it crosses this show line going to the right, it will count it as a car. It probably catches every half to a third of the cars. However, most people who come see this loop 2 or 3 times. So there's nothing mission critical with the number we're gathering. It's just it's an experiment we've been trying this year. So we roughly call it right. We're not going to judge anything on it, but it does give us a good idea what's going on. One of the cool things and why I chose Camlytics is it will publish all that information into a chart and make that available via JSON. So we've got scripting that runs in the core, and this goes out and checks against that URL of that graph. We tell it how often to update. So every 5 minutes, I go and check it. And I only check it during show hours. So it's watching the show hours. It's only checking during the show hours. And then it is adding them up. So last night, everything ended at 11:55 was the last check it did. There were 511 cars. So I've also got it keeping a log. So here's every day of the show. It just adds first thing in the morning. It goes through, adds it up. So we've had roughly that it's detected 10,939 car passes through this year so far. Like I said, we're going to keep playing with it during the off season. This is one of the really hard things to test because when there's not the show going on, there's maybe 2 cars a day that go through. So trying to figure out how it works when it's bumper to bumper traffic, when there's all sorts of stuff, we really couldn't test any of that until the show started. And all of that feeds over into our new alerting mechanism. So a lot of this all does report up to Reflect. So we can see it all in Reflect. But we wanted an easy way to be able to give notifications and give select notifications with different priorities to people in the neighborhood. That's where we started leveraging a service called Pushover. So Pushover is back to PowerPoint, show this. Pushover is an app. It runs on iOS. It runs on Android. There's a Mac version of it. It basically has an API you post your messages to, and then it sends out those notifications. It can send them to groups. It can send them to individuals. I've been using this for a long time. I tie this in with HomeKit to be able to send me temperatures from my outdoor wood burner if it goes over 10. But we started integrating it from Q-SYS. So I've actually written both a sender and a receiver, so Q-SYS can receive the messages. We haven't implemented anything from that, but Q-SYS can send out messages. So anytime something goes into, we have 2 different notification channels that come through. We have status notifications and car counts. So every hour at the top of the hour, we send out the car count to everybody. So this comes through as a push notification on the phone saying, hey, here's the car count. It was 6 at 5 o'clock, which is not surprising. It's still light. And then with the statuses, anytime something goes into a fault, it sends out a message. You can see it's highlighted red. That they have some basic priority levels set with it. So that'll actually come through as a time-sensitive notification on iOS and stay up. And then we also send an all clear if everything clears out. At the beginning, so our show hour script, one thing it does when it starts for the day, it sends out a report for us. So we know, hey, the show started at this time, it stopped at this time. We're going to turn off the FM at this time. The lights will go off at this time. Here's the overall status. So it's a nice, easy way. People just put an app. I think it's like $10 one time for the app. And you can do like 10,000 API calls a month for free with it. So we've yet to hit that limit. So we have that running throughout the design as well. And that gets us, because I know we're getting tight on time. That's everything we've got in production. The last thing I said was getting into some of the power monitoring. So how do we monitor the power? And this got into a much larger, we'll call it philosophy or thinking about how we're approaching all this. Right now, we're doing a lot of pinging. We're doing a lot of API calls. It's not necessarily taking down the show network, but it's a lot of unnecessary traffic. So FPP natively supports a protocol called MQTT. MQTT is a really cool protocol. What it involves is clients and a broker. So you have a centralized server that all the clients subscribe to, and then people push their messages. You post to what's called a topic or a channel on there. And then anybody can subscribe to it and get all those messages. So, for example, I've got, where'd it go? Oh, it won't pull up, but I'll show in just a second the Q-SYS. We can get all the FPP, then players can natively send it right up to there. So now I'm not having to send an API call to each one. They can natively post it there. And say I wanted other stuff to interface with it as well, everybody can just connect to that one centralized server to get all that data. It excites me a lot as a protocol because now I don't have to deal with everybody's API specific stuff. If a device supports MQTT, then it will natively support doing talking with it. So one of the things we started adding this year, I talked a little on the network side, are these Shelly controllers. So right here, they have a plug-based version, or this is one that you can actually hardwire in. So this is one of those K8 controllers. It powers 8 pixels locally, but it's wired straight into a Meanwhile 12-volt power supply. I can't control it. So what we've done, and I've proof of concept this on a couple different controllers, is actually add these power relays in line. Couple cool things it gives us. One, it connects Wi-Fi, and I can go in and just remotely toggle the power. It has both a WebSocket and a REST API, so I could interface with it that way. But it also supports MQTT, so it's more reason leveraging me to jump over to MQTT. It'll also not only control, it's got a relay for the power, but also monitor power. It'll tell us the load, how many watts we're using and all that. So that started our journey on this. The other thing we had to add this year is we had to add an emergency stop. We're getting so many people and everything. It was requested we have an easy way to shut this down. So we built a big looking e-stop button and just put a Pi Pico in there, and that communicates over MQTT. So we've started transitioning a lot of stuff over, and the last part of that is actually transitioning Q-SYS over. So a lot of this is still, I'll say, very active development. So I'm actually running a lot of this on a second core, but we're sending some of the data over to the primary core. Here I've got my main script. This script is handling all the communication to the MQTT broker. In my case, that's those redundant pies we showed. So this is connecting in, and then all these subscripts are talking via notifications over to it and subscribing to their topics. So we can see all the power monitors have their own topic. If it's /pound, then it gives you every subtopic after that. So we can see the last message was sent, in this case, Matt Powermon status switch 0. And here's the message. It's a JSON string, and it's showing me, and I'm breaking it out here. So here's the temperature of the ESP32 in there. Here's the current it's drawing. Here's the wattage. Here's the voltage. So we've had this running for a little while on the power monitoring. It's working really well. You can also send messages out of this. So this is the next step is right now I'm in the middle of just sort of load testing this and seeing what kind of load this is putting on Q-SYS, because there's a lot of messages I want to subscribe to. And it's been really rock solid. So we can also send messages back out. The next goal would be able to actually turn the outlet off, turn it on. So now we can start adding control for those controllers that are not PoE powered. So we've got 7 different Shellys going right now. We are bringing that over into our UCI just to be, wrong tab. So we bring that over. we're sending that status over a control link back to the main core. So we're seeing the status of that. One of the cool other things we're doing is I'm just adding up the wattage. And there's an API from the Department of Energy. You can look up your power cost. So these little portion of the show, which is nowhere near the whole show, but we always get asked how much does it cost. Right now, it's costing me 3 cents an hour to run this portion of the show. So that's some of the cool stuff we gain from this as well. The primary goal is really to get it for control of the Shellys and other devices, or getting status back so we can see our e-stop is reporting in here. We have a read switch on the door, so we know if somebody opens the door, and we know if the e-stop goes active. One of the cool things is in the Python code we wrote with MQTT, there are topics Falcon Pi player listens to as well. So the e-stop, when it goes, not only does it send a message to Q-SYS, but it also talks directly both to the primary and secondary show controller. So it adds some layers of redundancy built in. We also have a heartbeat it puts out. So every, I think 30 or 60 seconds, we put out a heartbeat. So we know that the e-stop's alive. So a lot of cool stuff with that.
So we've
And
got
so
a
you can see
couple
here. Yeah.
couple questions coming in. I know we're running pretty short on time left,
Yeah.
but someone asked, how are you handling the life safety requirements for the e-stop with the network systems, which I think you kind of just covered with talking to the individuals as well as to the
Yeah.
global system. Did you have to get AHJ approvals for that? And if so, what was that process like?
Not really, but we do. We talk a lot with our local township because, we do get a couple hundred cars a night. It does impact stuff. So we've talked with the local fire chief a bunch. They're aware of it. We're actually working on some ways they can preemptively notify us if something happens. But we've got a lot of different ways. Everybody's got a radio that can shut the show down. We've never had to stop the show down. We've had a couple years ago had to get a squad run in. People pull over. This is really just some extra we're doing on top just to help keep them happy. But we've never negatively had a reason to do this. We're just proactively doing it because we're getting so big every year. So,
And then the next question is from Andy, and at risk of making the obvious one in the Q-SYS webinar, but did you consider anything other than Q-SYS as your control and monitoring system for this, and why?
We've looked at some. I've played with some other stuff. There are certain things that there are certain additional things we run that are not in Q-SYS. So we don't have the time to dive in, but I'll share at the end of this. Almost all these scripts are on a public GitHub repo that I'm going to put a link to on communities, so you can see all this. There are some things in here. So like the Shellys support local JavaScripting. So actually in that little power monitor, we can tell it runs a ping against the primary player, the secondary player, and the MQTT broker. And it starts with the primary player. If it can't go there, then it goes. If all of that fails, it actually then reboots. So say the switch locked up or the Wi-Fi antenna locked up or something. So there is some edge-based control we're doing that's not natively in Q-SYS. The e-stop is all Python written that's running on a PyPico. But for the most part, all the main stuff, I haven't really thought of moving it out of Q-SYS because we're now, especially we're running the audio through it, I can analyze that. And Q-SYS gives a really easy way. Like when I want to spin up a new device, I just copy and paste and throw a monitoring proxy in, and now it's automatically monitoring. So there's a lot of ease of doing it in Q-SYS and using Q-SYS overall, and then you can see we're using CodePin a lot here to manage code base across stuff. I don't know if I'd do any other platform just from the scalability ease of it too. Because in addition to writing all this, I also got to program the show and get it up and open. And so keeping it an easy way to scale, because every year we're adding, I think we added 4 or 5 controllers this year. No, we added more. We had like 7 controllers this year. 2 new network switch locations. It keeps growing a lot. So, yeah. So that's where there is some stuff as we move everything over to MQTT. There's some stuff natively the broker can do. So, like having the broker send messages to push over directly if a device disconnects. That's something I've played with. It all just comes down to managing where you want the single point of truth for everything. So that's where our goal is to get everything to Q-SYS monitoring, communicating over MQTT, and using GitHub as our single source of truth for any type of hours or where do we store configs or anything, so that we can easily integrate with all that. So and that's where we sort of ended here is we've now had up and running all the same information. We're pulling API. We are pulling MQTT from all the Falcons. So this is pulling all 26 players and pulling in all their status. So this is sort of still at the burn-in phase. There is we've got, pulling data is working really well. Sending data is working. There's still a little bit of cleanup on it. There's a lot more to the MQTT protocol I need to bake into this. Like we've got subscribing, but I need to add in some unsubscribing. It's definitely a lot more I bit off than when I originally thought. The protocol is very cool. It's very lightweight. It is all hex based for a lot of the stuff. So there's a lot of hex calculations you got to do. It's a very cool, powerful protocol. And that's why I'm a lot of this I'm trying to build so that it is something I can plug in eyes and throw on communities to be able to use. We're starting to see it creep into AV devices a lot more, but this is what IoT devices use this a lot. And that's also another reason I went with MQTT for all this is this also gives us the ability to start playing with moving some of this data to the cloud. So all Azure, AWS, IoT, all those support MQTT natively. So that's where it gets really fun, is you could actually locate your broker in the cloud or run a hybrid on-prem and cloud-based, and then start being able to pull in a lot of cool cloud-based, analytics and everything. That's one other thing we very briefly just scratched the surface of is right now I've got the Reflect API reporting into Grafana, and that's another project for next year, is actually to be able to start visualizing what's going on with everything. Right now it's very very rough. I can pull the status in. That's about it. I'm still learning Grafana as I go. So, but that's sort of where we're trying to take all this now, is we have a ton of data. What can we do with it to start watching it over time and everything? So. Awesome. So with that, that's the big part of it. So I'm going to go ahead and open up for any questions. I want to thank everybody for sticking around, going over a little. Yeah, if you're anywhere near Columbus, Ohio, come check this out. And like I said at the beginning, I'll post a link on communities later on today that's got a link to all the repositories from this. It's got link to the video, and got some screenshots of stuff too. So
I'll kickstart this the Q&A off with the question that happens quite a lot is if I wanted to get my own Q-SYS lighting starter kit running, what's the bare bones to get something, a little show up and running?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways you can do it. You can drive lighting data out of Q-SYS. Trying to design a show like this, I would never, ever, ever do. But if I'm just doing some basic control, when we first started, we were using what are called lightorama dimmers, which are we're controlling the regular lights. Those are just DMX. We would write the show in X lights, or at that point we used Vixen. But during the off season, I had some permanent light. I had some permanent ones I kept up. I just had Q-SYS drive that. There's some great, plenty of different options. There's some plugins on Asset Manager to drive DMX. Michael Goodyear has some really rock solid ArtNet and SACN scripts on GitHub. I can have Q-SYS drive basic lighting. And do it that way, and then just use a node in between, so something that converts ArtNet or SACN to DMX, and do it that way. If I want to get really bare bones started, the pixels you see behind me are driven from a little teeny $20 WLED controller. So WLED is an open source project, sort of similar to FPP. You can get, it's $20 on Amazon for a all-in-one controller that drives strips of pixels. It'll drive 2 strips out of it. I think up to a couple hundred pixels each. And that has a basic API you can integrate with. It'll also receive data in. So I can take one of those scripts and send SACN or ArtNet to that. So that's it. WLED is an easy way to start with this. Going in this route, those controllers I showed, the little Culp K8 is a really great basic way to start. You got 8 local ports. You can drive some remotes off it. So it's a very slippery slope once you start. You start off saying, I'm going to start really small. And then, next thing you know, you blink and you wake up and you got 12 acres of lights going. So
that's a perfect segue to the next question. How much do you and your neighbors actively monitor the show while it's running?
So now that everything is pretty much automated, very little. If it sends me a notification, usually I'll give it, it's 30 seconds or so, and see if it self-resolves itself. I'm trying to think back now. We have yet to have an issue this year that Q-SYS hasn't self-healed itself from. I'm trying to think if there's been any scenario I've actually had to go in with the UCI. It's very rare. So that's really the goal of it, especially I travel a lot. I want this thing to take care of itself. So yeah, I think the only thing I've tried figuring out that one controller I have that walks up. I think it's the USB NIC, but I'm not sure. But that's actually physical hardware, but Q-SYS still solves it every day. It just was driving me crazy that, every day it would reboot itself, but it takes care of it. So we pay more attention to the people coming through, keeping track of the unique, we had a full-size tour bus, a trolley, and a couple party buses go through last night. So that's the most attention we usually pay. So the first couple of years, we start the show at 4:30 to make sure everything's running and walk through and check it, and have to resolve stuff. It was much, much more hands-on. Now it's really just let it do its thing.
So you mentioned that one of your neighbors helps you program the lighting show. How many of your neighbors are Q-SYS certified now, Kevin?
None. It's just me.
Just you?
So,
None of
they
them
don't
have
touch
shown
the
any
Q-SYS
interest
side.
yet.
They do the hardware building side. The one who helps with all the hardware stuff, he probably runs the 3D printer 24/7 for 2 or 3 months building stuff for this. So he handles all that side. The only controllers I've built in the past year or two are mine. So he handles all that. He handled coordination. You'll see in the video, we added a 300-foot long, 15-foot high tunnel to drive through. So he had to figure all that out. So we helped divvy that up. So he knows how to get in UCI viewer, how to get in through Reflect, how to do it all through the UCI side, and resolve anything that way.
Awesome. Well, if you have any questions, keep them coming into the chat. We are starting to see the numbers just slowly dwindle down. But where can we find more Kevin in the meantime?
Yeah. Yeah. Check out communities. We'll post a lot of this on there. So, yeah, I'm scrolling through to see if there's anything else. But I want to thank everybody coming out. Have a happy holidays. We'll see everybody. I think we start up again the second week of January for deep dives. So, you should see that schedule coming out pretty soon. Yeah.